Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the total lunar eclipse in Scorpio, which is happening on the 5th of May, Cinco de Mayo for most people, but for some it will probably be on the 6th because I'm thinking about my time zone, which is the central time zone in the United States, and it's happening after, I think it's like 12:23 p.m. So I think there are some places in the world that are 16 hours ahead of me. So that would be on the 6th for some individuals. And it's going to be at almost 15 degrees of Scorpio, 14 degrees, 52 minutes, something like that. So, whenever there is a lunar eclipse, this is like a powerful full moon. And full moons, lunar eclipses, the sun is opposing this moon. And that means that the sun is in the exact same degree in the opposite sign. So we're talking about Taurus versus Scorpio. Taurus and Scorpio are fixed signs, and they represent houses that what they have in common is about money, resources. The second house that Taurus rules is connected to personal finances as well as the monetary system itself. And the eighth house is connected to shared resources. So whether it is, two spouses, whether it is a family, and an inheritance situation, those kinds of financial matters, as well as money that a person gets from an outer source, like through a loan or money that you owe, a debt. So these themes may be activated at this time, and because both of these signs can also be associated with relationships in some way, every sign can. It's not like these signs specialize in it, although I would say that Scorpio is the house of intimacy, so it really does speak about relationships at the deepest level. I'm including Taurus because Taurus is ruled by Venus, and so you can look at it from that angle. But because Taurus is a sign that is connected with possessiveness, and in a sense, I would say the same of Scorpio, although Taurus really gets this label because the second house is also the house of possessions. So for Taurus people, and I'm speaking of the sun, moon, and even the rising sign, can all have this as part of their influence. And I suppose you could say even Venus in Taurus as well. The person can just be the sort of individual who, wants to have ownership. And that can extend to their relationships. And yes, romantic relationships, but maybe even friendships, maybe even feeling jealousy with their family members. All these things can come into play. And with jealousy, just like covetousness, or greed, grasping kinds of feelings, is fear. What's behind that is fear. The person fears the loss of something, so they feel like they have to hold on very tightly. I think of the Four of Pentacles in the tarot because they show someone holding on to this coin, for dear life. So these themes can play out, with the eighth house and shared resources, I think of that movie called The War of the Roses. And I remember like Michael Douglas was in it, Danny DeVito, but Kathleen Turner. And it came out in 1989. It came out in the late 80s. And the 80s, the latter part of the 80s, was really about abject materialism. Wall Street, the movie Wall Street, I think came out in 1985. And Michael Douglas, who was also in War of the Roses, said greed is good. And that kind of mantra culminated in this movie, The War of the Roses, which was supposed to be a black comedy. And actually, I didn't find it very funny at all because to me, I really believed that this is how some people operate. And I have a feeling that whoever wrote that script, I think Danny DeVito wrote it, I'm not sure. But well, if Danny DeVito wrote it, then he didn't experience it. But he might have, whoever wrote it may have witnessed other people in Hollywood who had these major divorces where a lot of money was at stake. And it's really, to me, it's very ugly, when people fight about money and possessions. And it was even about possessions too, and kind of breaking all these like expensive items and things like that. And I just did not, it just kind of, didn't sit right with me, but, it was supposed to be a black comedy. So these kinds of issues can flare up for couples and for any type of relationship that you're involved in. So, watch out for that, especially if you have sun, moon, and or ascendant in Taurus and Scorpio, because these will hit your relationship houses. And some of you who are going through a divorce may find that these themes come to a head for some reason. Also, remember that with full moons, it can bring out secrets. And Scorpio is really the king or queen of secrets. It's a very secretive sign, probably due to the Pluto influence. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto and Mars, and Pluto tends to be that covert type of influence, although Pluto also uncovers covert things. So it uncovers the secrets. There is every possibility that we are going to see some kind of major disclosure. People who have been waiting for the last few years for a disclosure have different pet issues. Some people are interested in the space program and aliens and all of that stuff, and some people are interested in exposing the healthcare system and all of the abuses that they feel occurred. Some people feel that there has been a lot of sex scandals, sexual things that need to be revealed that are explosive. And I personally think that could be one of the big ones, because Scorpio and Taurus, but I mean, Scorpio rules a house that's connected to sex, but the taboo variety. So, yeah, I mean, that could be quite explosive, because Pluto indicates power, and we think about people in positions of power. And if these things get revealed, it could have a domino effect, because it's like one thing leads to another. And that's to me also like connecting the dots. One of the things that people who mock conspiracy theorists, or as I call them, conspiracy realists, is this idea of, oh, this is connected to that, and they seem like they're so far apart. And that's because some people don't have that ability to look at the bigger picture and see the holistic angle where things are a whole and that they all belong together. A lot of people see things as completely separated from one another, and they may not be at all. So that's happening. And I think that the higher vibration, the higher level of this is not about vengefulness, because Scorpio can very definitely be connected to vengefulness. I do believe now that it is through the co-ruler Mars and not Pluto. I used to think it was Pluto, but then I began observing Aries people that I know, or even maybe famous Aries people, and there was a vengefulness with them as well. It's kind of that warrior energy where somebody feels like they're on the side of good and they're kind of like fighting for the underdog, I would say. So it's not necessarily coming from a negative place. It's not like somebody who just wants to start shit. It's because they feel that they are fighting for the voiceless, for instance, the people that are weaker, that can't fight for themselves. So the point is that the higher octave of this is about healing, and that's how I see Pluto, is that it has a healing effect. But first comes the purge. If you've ever like puked your guts out, and it's a horrible feeling to puke, that, vomiting is just a horrible thing. When I was a kid, I had like a phobia about vomiting because I had my stomach pumped when I was like 2 years old because I ate a bunch of vitamins and or some kind of pills that were lying around. My mother thought I was going to OD or something. So I always had this phobia about that. But once it happens, you feel this sense of like cleansing effect. And so this can be the result of what happens. And we don't have to feel this fear surrounding this, because we know that when we get to the other side, it's going to be okay. But it doesn't mean that it's not like very emotionally disturbing sometimes. But you can kind of mitigate this by how you choose to, react to things. And actually, it goes without saying that reacting is not really a great way to deal with revelations that occur, but rather to kind of sit with these things and allow them to settle. So I want to talk about some of the aspects and also the planetary signs that are occurring right now. I said Venus is in Gemini, but Mars is in Cancer. And there's a trine between the moon and Mars, which is really good. You could call it a saving grace, because for anybody who has in their natal chart a square between the moon and Mars, or an opposition, or even a conjunction, you may find that you have a lot of emotional volatility, and that you tend to act on your emotions, and that can be disastrous, obviously. And a trine is as good as it gets. So that can mean that there's a sense of harmony and a sense of so in other words, a balance. And because it's in water, that can also connect with the intuitive side of things. And we need that because we need to be able to be emotionally intelligent at this time, especially if things come up that are very triggering. Because if we do have some kind of big reveal, depending on what it is, people personally may have some sort of experience with these things, and it could be upsetting for them because it reminds them of something that they went through, and it could set them off. So this is supportive energy, in other words. One thing that is connected to the moon, there are a couple of things they're connected to watch out for, though. An opposition between the moon and Mercury. Mercury is in Taurus and the moon is in Scorpio. And this is a wider orb, 8 degrees. So I don't know if this will be like that influential, but this goes without saying anyway in life. But when you are emotional, you have to be especially careful of the words that you choose, because you can't take them back even if you apologize. And it isn't necessarily, I mean, this could run the gamut. Somebody could suddenly decide that they want to bare their soul to someone that is very manipulative, or, doesn't really care about them and uses their words against them, because usually there's a guardedness with Scorpio. But when you have this opposition, the person may project onto another person. That's what oppositions do. It can involve relationships, and they may think that this person is trustworthy when they're not. So it's not so much, yes, of course, getting things out is good, but you also have to be discerning. And so something along those lines, or any kind of negative emotional release that involves verbal stuff, watch out for. And the other one too is an opposition between the moon and Uranus, and that can be something where there is erratic emotional stuff happening, where you may 1 minute feel one way and next minute feel another way. Uranus is in Taurus, which is an earth sign, so it has a more of a grounding effect, but it is resulting in a hard angle. So that erratic emotional output is something that I always notice when a full moon is approaching. And they say that this eclipse energy can actually be way before the actual date, and I feel like I have noticed this. It could be even with the solar eclipse that it was producing that same kind of thing, because that was in Aries, and that could have been emotionally volatile as well. And let's see, there was something else I wanted to mention along these lines. Well, what I wanted to say is that Cancer is a very kind of clingy sign, so emotionally clingy. So even though the moon and Mars are in good aspect, it could still, when it involves relationships, I feel like there can be manipulation that occurs. There's a square between an opposition between Mars and Pluto. Pluto is at 0 degrees of Aquarius, but that's on the cusp with Capricorn, so that's what they mean by that. So this actually is something to watch out for, because a hard angle from Mars to Pluto could be violence. And this is occurring on the weekend, either Friday or Saturday for people. So a lot of people, the reason that they go out and maybe drink and things like that to let off steam is because they feel very pent up by their work demands. And so they're kind of like, oh, good. And especially, I mean, yeah, they do it on Saturday night too, but Friday is the last day of the work week for a lot of people. So that's why they're chomping at the bit to kind of reward themselves for having made it through another week. So, think about what your plans are that weekend. Do you have any plans to do something that would involve a big crowd of people, or something where there might be a lot of intoxication? Because I'm not a person to plant fear in people, but that is pretty intense, that kind of an aspect. And given the fact that this is a lunar eclipse, it's in Scorpio and it's happening on the weekend, it's the perfect storm for something like that. And again, even an engineered event that is coming from a manufactured event. Now, I'm not saying it's not real, but it may have like false origins. I, was born in Chicago, and I've lived in this area my whole life, and there was something called the Haymarket Riot that some people may be familiar with, because that involved anarchists, fighting for workers' rights. And this was in the late 1800s. And somebody threw firecrackers into the crowd, and they blamed it on the anarchists. And they became martyrs. I think a policeman was killed. Same old, These kinds of things happen. And by the way, anarchists, we can talk about those kinds of terms. That doesn't mean that if somebody's calling themselves an anarchist now, that it's the same thing as back then. So let's not get it twisted. But anyway, if there is some kind of a political event, or just some kind of an event that occurs that entices people to protest because they're outraged by this event, obviously I don't know because I'm recording this weeks in advance, but just kind of really feel into yourself if it feels right for you, because that's the beauty of doing advanced readings on certain things that are coming up, is that you can think it through before it comes about. If it comes about, who knows? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. So let's see, what else do I want to say? Well, the other nice thing is that now there's a trine between Mars and Neptune. For a long time, there was a square because Mars was in Gemini for months, 7 months, and Neptune has been in Pisces, and those two signs square off. But now that Mars is in Cancer, they are forming a trine, and this is great because what you do can be helpful on the spiritual level, and it can have a healing effect, rather than a square which can produce that friction, which can lead to a person doing things thinking that they are helping others, but they're actually promoting a deceptive thing that is going on. And even in those particular cases, it's not to put down the people whose heart is in the right place. It's simply to say that it is misguided, and it, may lead to, some serious consequences. So, yeah. I think I want to end here by just talking very briefly about relationships. And this is purely my opinion, but I don't think it's an opinion. I think it's a fact. And I believe that we don't own anyone. Even if we go to the trouble of getting a marriage license, we sign on the dotted line, and we get a ring to symbolize it, and we stand in front of people and have 500 people at the wedding, pay a lot of money for a wedding reception. We still don't own that other person. And things happen in life where people grow at different rates. And I feel that if you really love someone, you're going to want the best for them, even if it means that you are suffering in silence. And believe me, I don't think you're going to suffer forever. I think that the more that we can think of the other person and their happiness and relinquish all control over needing to have them be in our life, the better. Because if somebody doesn't want to be with you for whatever the reason is, trying to keep them there is and sometimes this involves like begging and pleading and guilting and things like that. That's not the way to go, because maybe if they're a decent person, they're going to relent, and they might stay out of you due to feeling of obligation or guilt or what have you. But do you really want that? So if you're dealing with this issue, I hope that that can help you look at the situation from a higher perspective, because I do feel that a lot of people are going through turmoil in their relationships. Well, maybe I'm exaggerating. I don't know how many people, but certainly this full moon, this lunar eclipse, can, even since Uranus is opposing this lunar eclipse, it can create a sudden break. And there is also another astrologer talking about how the South Node was in play here too. So I'm assuming, I guess I could look, but I don't think my ephemeris doesn't have the South Node. So I'm not going to even bother, but I'm just going by some other astrologer talking about it. So the North Node is currently in Taurus, because the eclipses are connected to the nodes and transiting nodes, obviously. And so the South Node, which is the karmic past, is in the same sign as the lunar eclipse. So there's something very familiar about that, and yet it opposes both Uranus and the North Node, which means, and the Sun, which means that that is the direction we are meant to go towards, which is about freedom at this time. So it could be a break from the past, maybe a break from a soul contract. And I remember another astrologer talking about lunar eclipses as grace from God, because sometimes we want desperately to end something, but we just feel like we can't do it on our own. So just keep that in mind, because with Mars and Cancer, the temptation is to cling, and the clinging that is connected to Cancer comes from the past. Six of Cups in the tarot, the good old days, the nostalgia for maybe better times. And that just keeps people hooked into an illusion, because obviously if there are problems now, it means that it's not the same as it was then. And so we have to be able to accept that and not fear that something is wrong because things have changed. No, this is what life is about. It's about growth. So embrace growth. And this could happen in a different area of your life, but it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that people are willing to let go and let God. And this is true for all eclipses, is that if the person hangs on, kicking and screaming, they're going to suffer much more than if they think of it, if they frame it as, I guess this was meant to be. I guess this is part of my soul's evolution. And in that case, then you see things from a much more mature and balanced perspective. And that will help you to fare better in these changes that are likely to occur. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.